When my son-in-law raised his beer at Thanksgiving and laughed, "Old man, you be the easiest guy in this whole neighborhood to rob," I didn't shout, I didn't flinch, I just smiled. What he didn't know was that I had spent decades writing the very laws he thought he could use against me. By Christmas, his laughter would turn into silence, and that was just the start of his nightmare. Justice had to be restored, and you won't believe what happened next. Stay with me till the end, and if you believe arrogance always deserves a lesson, hit subscribe right now. I should probably start from the beginning. My name's Richard Miller, 62 years old, retired after 3 decades practicing estate law in Ohio. If you've ever watched lawyers argue over wills, trusts, or messy inheritances, well, that was my battlefield. I've seen greed rip families apart like wild animals fighting over scraps. That's probably why I value peace so much now. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. Not because of the turkey, but because it was the one time of year my daughter Emily would still come home. She's my pride, bright, kind, and the kind of woman who'd rather help her neighbors shovel snow than let them struggle alone. But with Emily came Jason, her husband. Jason strutted in that afternoon like he owned the place, shaking snow from his boots onto my rug without even thinking to wipe them. He's 30, maybe 31, stocky with the kind of gym muscles built more for Instagram than real work. He works in finance, though from the way he talks, I guess it's mostly get-rich-quick schemes and chasing other people's money. At first, I tried. I really did. When Emily first married him 2 years ago, I told myself he was just young brash, still finding his footing. But Jason never seemed interested in family. He wasn't here for connection. He was here for opportunity. Thanksgiving dinner went as it always did: mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and too much wine. Jason poured himself a third glass, leaned back, and smirked at me across the table. "That's a nice place you've got, Rich," he said, eyes wandering the crown molding and the grandfather clock I'd inherited from my father. "Big house for just one old guy. Easy target if someone ever wanted to, help themselves." Emily's fork froze mid-air. My nephew coughed. The whole table went quiet. Jason just chuckled, raising his glass like it was some kind of joke. Now, I've lived long enough to know the difference between a drunk joke and a power move. That wasn't comedy. That was Jason staking a claim, testing me in front of everyone, letting me know he saw me as weak. I didn't bite. I simply smiled, like I had when opposing attorneys thought they'd cornered me in court. But in my head, I was cataloging everything: his tone, his arrogance, the way Emily's shoulders tensed like she'd heard this before. The truth is, Jason had already been circling me for months. Little questions disguised as small talk, about my savings, whether my will was updated, if I had plans for the house when I got older. Emily brushed it off as curiosity, but I knew better. You don't spend 30 years drafting wills without recognizing a vulture circling overhead. And that night, when Jason laughed and called me easy to rob, I realized something. He wasn't just dangerous in theory. He was stupid enough to act on it. And stupidity mixed with greed? That's a fire that burns fast, and burns down everything in its path. The days after Thanksgiving were quiet, too quiet. Snow covered the yard, muffling every sound in the neighborhood. But in my gut, I felt that storm wasn't over. Jason's little joke had been more than liquid courage. It was a warning shot. Emily called me the following week, her voice low, almost embarrassed. "Dad, Jason's curious again. He keeps asking about your retirement accounts. He says he's just trying to help you plan better." I sighed. "Sweetheart, you know I've got that all handled. I wrote half the estate plans in Franklin County." "I know," she said softly. "I told him that. He just doesn't listen." I didn't want to burden her, but I could hear it in her tone. She was caught between loyalty to her husband and love for me. And Jason? He was exploiting that. A week later, I noticed something strange. The side gate to my backyard, the one that always stuck from winter frost, was wide open. At first, I blamed the wind. But then I found fresh boot prints in the snow, heavier than mine, leading straight to my garage. Nothing was missing, but my tools had been shifted, like someone had rifled through them. I set up cameras the next day. Old habit from my law days: trust people, but verify everything. That weekend, I caught him. Jason's truck pulled up at midnight. He slipped through the side gate, fumbling with the lock like a teenager sneaking into a liquor store. Except this wasn't harmless mischief. He carried a crowbar. On the footage, he moved fast, straight to the basement window, prying at the frame. My house wasn't Fort Knox, but it wasn't exactly easy either. He struggled, cursed under his breath, and finally gave up, retreating like a frustrated wolf. Watching that video, I felt two things at once: fury and clarity. Fury that he dared invade my home, risk Emily's trust, threaten the safety I'd built. Clarity that this wasn't just about money. This was about dominance. Jason wanted me out of the way, whether by manipulation or intimidation. And Emily? She had no clue. At Sunday dinner, Jason acted like nothing happened. He even complimented my cooking. "Best pot roast in the county, Rich," he grinned, flashing that smug smile. I stared at him across the table, picturing him in my basement just 48 hours earlier. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. 30 years in law taught me patience. You don't interrupt a man digging his own grave, you hand him a bigger shovel. Things escalated quickly. One afternoon, I came home from running errands and found my filing cabinet cracked open. My will, my trust documents, moved. I locked those drawers religiously. Jason had keys through Emily, and now he was snooping. Then came the insurance call. My agent rang to confirm updates I supposedly requested, beneficiary changes, address shifts. My heart sank. Jason had tried to impersonate me. He wasn't just testing the waters anymore, he was staging for a takeover. I played it calm on the phone, shut it all down, and set stricter alerts. But inside, I burned. This man, my daughter's husband, thought he could erase me like I was just another outdated signature. The final straw came 2 nights later. I returned from choir practice to find the back door ajar, lock splintered. My living room looked ransacked, drawers pulled, papers scattered. And standing right in the middle, bold as brass, was Jason. He didn't even flinch when I walked in. He just smirked. "Didn't think you'd be home so soon, Rich. Place like this, too much for you to keep up with. Maybe time you pass it on." I froze, hand still on the doorknob. For a moment, the weight of betrayal crushed me. This wasn't just some petty thief. This was family, or at least, he'd married into it. And here he was, robbing me blind in my own living room. "You need to leave," I said, steady but sharp. Jason laughed, stepping closer, crowbar still dangling from his grip. "Or what, old man? You'll call the cops? You think Emily's gonna believe you over me?" That cut deeper than any weapon. He wasn't just threatening me, he was twisting my daughter's love against me, betting I'd stay silent to keep her happy. And for a split second, I almost broke. Almost let the humiliation swallow me whole. But then, the lawyer in me woke up. If Jason thought I was defenseless, he was dead wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Jason's words echoed in my head like a broken record. "You think Emily's gonna believe you over me?" He was bold enough to break into my home and smug enough to weaponize my daughter's love. I knew I couldn't play this with brute force. I had to outthink him. The next morning, I went down to the police station with the security footage tucked neatly onto a flash drive. Officer Daniels, a younger guy I'd mentored years ago when he was studying criminal justice, shook his head after watching Jason stumble with the crowbar. "Mr. Whitman, this is clear breaking and entering. You want us to bring him in?" Tempting. God, it was tempting. But I raised a hand. "Not yet. If he walks in wearing handcuffs, Emily will see me as the aggressor. I need him to hang himself with his own rope. I just need this logged and time-stamped." Daniels gave me a look, half respect, half disbelief. "You always were 3 steps ahead. We'll keep it quiet." Walking out of that station, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was building a case. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an email alert. Someone had tried to access my 401k online. Multiple failed attempts. Jason was sloppy. I didn't shut the account down, not yet. Instead, I called my old friend and colleague Linda Hayes, one of the sharpest estate attorneys in Ohio. When I explained, she chuckled softly. "Rich, you're sitting on a gold mine of evidence. If he pushes 1 step further, we can bury him legally. Just don't tip your hand too soon." That was the breadcrumb I needed, I wasn't just some retired widower living alone. I had allies. I had law on my side. Meanwhile, Jason's arrogance grew louder. At Sunday brunch, he slapped me on the back so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Careful there, old man," he said loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Don't want you breaking a hip before we get you into a nursing home, huh?" The table chuckled nervously, even Emily, though I could see her eyes flicker with discomfort. Jason thought humiliation kept me small. What he didn't notice was how the waitress, who overheard everything, scribbled something down. She later slipped me her number, whispering, "If you need a witness for anything, I saw it all." Witnesses. Evidence. A pattern of abuse. Every cruel jab he made in public was one more nail in his coffin. But the real twist came the following week. Jason strutted into my garage uninvited again, this time in broad daylight. I let him rant about how I was living in the past, how my house was too much responsibility, how Emily deserved better. He waved his hand so wildly that he didn't even notice the little red light blinking in the corner. I'd upgraded my security system, new cameras, new cloud storage, all synced directly to Linda's office. When he finally stormed off, muttering threats under his breath, my phone pinged. Footage uploaded successfully. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Jason thought he was the wolf circling an old sheep. He didn't realize the sheep had already called the shepherd and set the trap. This wasn't just self-defense anymore. This was strategy. And Jason had no idea the walls were already closing in. I'd spent most of my retirement letting people believe I was just another widower mowing his lawn and checking the mailbox twice a day. In some ways, it was easier to fade into the background. After Margaret passed, I didn't have the energy to correct people's assumptions. If they thought I was harmless, so be it. But Jason had made one mistake: he underestimated me, and worse, he underestimated my history. Back in the late 1980s, I wasn't pushing carts at Home Depot like he once joked to Emily. I was sitting in Washington, D.C., inside mahogany-paneled hearing rooms, giving testimony on insurance fraud before the Senate Finance Committee. My specialty as a federal insurance investigator wasn't just finding who stole, it was proving it in ways so airtight that even the slickest lawyers couldn't wiggle free. I'd chased down embezzlers who laundered millions through shell companies in the Cayman Islands. I'd built sting operations that took down fake disability rings preying on veterans. And yes, I'd testified in cases where arrogant men laughed at me, right before they walked out of the courthouse in handcuffs. I had seen every trick in the book. Jason's attempt to jimmy a lock with a crowbar? Amateur hour. His fumbling login attempts on my 401k? Child's play. His threats? Recorded and archived. Still, I hadn't told Emily any of this. To her, I was just Dad, the man who grilled burgers in the backyard and overwatered the hydrangeas. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe by hiding my past, I'd allowed her to believe Jason's lies about me being helpless and past my prime. That illusion cracked one December evening, right after Jason stormed out of my garage. Emily dropped by to check in. She looked tired, her hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. "Dad," she sighed, "Jason says you're being paranoid. He says you've been spying on him, setting traps. He told me you even went to the police. Is that true?" I motioned for her to sit at the kitchen table. Instead of answering, I opened my laptop and clicked a few keys. Up popped the footage: Jason in my garage, pacing like a caged animal, muttering about how the old man won't see it coming. Emily froze. She watched her husband wave the crowbar, heard him spit out those words. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God." "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "I didn't want you to find out this way. But I need you to know something about me." I slid a battered leather folder across the table. Inside were clippings, newspaper headlines from years ago. Federal investigator cracks $4 million fraud ring. Senate praises investigator Whitman's relentless pursuit. A younger version of me stood in those photos, shaking hands with senators, standing beside agents in dark suits. Emily blinked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. You were an investigator?" 30 years, M. I made a career out of catching liars. I didn't just retire, I retired undefeated. Tears welled in her eyes, not just from fear but from betrayal. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't I know this about you?" I sighed. Because after your mother died, I wanted a quieter life. I wanted to be your dad, not some shadow of a man always looking over his shoulder. But Jason forced my hand. And now you need to know the truth. She sat back, silent, processing. I could almost see the gears turning. Every little dig Jason had made about me being senile, weak, or outdated suddenly collided with this new image of me, a man who had once put criminals behind bars. I thought he was protecting me, she whispered. All this time, I thought. Dad, what do we do? That was the turning point. For the first time, Emily wasn't defending him. She was looking at me for guidance. I reached for her hand. We let him dig his own grave. And then, when the time is right, we'll close it. But fate has a way of accelerating plans. The very next week, Jason overplayed his hand. He tried to move fast, probably panicked after realizing I'd upgraded my security system. He showed up at a Christmas charity gala, the same one Emily and I had been attending for years, drunk and running his mouth. In front of half the town, he boasted about cleaning out the old man soon. People laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. But Linda Hayes, my attorney friend, was standing 2 feet away, holding a glass of champagne. Her eyes locked with mine across the room. She'd heard every word. That was the night the tide turned. Emily wasn't just suspicious anymore, she was horrified. Jason wasn't a husband protecting her. He was a reckless fool about to implode. Later that evening, when we got home, she cornered me in the kitchen. Dad, I want out. But I don't know how. That's when I knew the past. All the years, all the cases, all the nights tracking fraudsters across state lines, hadn't been wasted. My skills, my history, were about to save my daughter. Not with fists. Not with anger. But with evidence, timing, and the law. Jason thought he was circling prey. He had no idea he'd walked into the courtroom of a man who had built his entire life dismantling predators just like him. The first real crack in Jason's mask came quicker than even I expected. 2 weeks after that gala, Emily filed a quiet petition for separation. She hadn't told Jason yet. Linda advised we time it carefully. In the meantime, I'd been documenting everything. Every late-night phone call he made that reeked of desperation, every time he loitered near my garage, every outburst that slipped from cocky to threatening. But the piece de resistance? It happened on a Tuesday morning in January. I was sipping my black coffee when my Ring doorbell buzzed. There Jason stood, hoodie pulled low, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He thought I wasn't home. I watched him on my phone screen, crouching, fumbling with the lock like some low-budget movie criminal. And then came the line, muttered under his breath, clear as day, "This old man won't see it coming. Easy money." Oh, but I saw it. And so did the HD camera, recording every word, time-stamped, uploaded to the cloud. Instead of confronting him, I let him stew. I called the police non-emergency line. Within minutes, a patrol car rolled up. The officer caught Jason mid-pry, still working the lock. The look on his face when those red and blue lights washed over him? Priceless. "Sir, step away from the door," the officer barked. Jason stammered something about misunderstanding, claiming he'd locked himself out. "Funny," the cop replied, holding up my Ring footage on his tablet. "I'd sent it seconds before. Because this video shows you saying otherwise." Jason's jaw slackened. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. They didn't arrest him right then, but they wrote it up, filed a full report. And here's where my decades of experience paid off. I knew exactly how to make that report matter. I looped in Linda, my attorney friend. Together, we built a case: attempted burglary, harassment, spousal endangerment. Layer after layer, we stacked it. And while Jason thought he could talk his way out, I stayed calm, quiet, and deliberate. The next domino fell at the HMA meeting. Jason had swaggered in, trying to play the victim. "Rich has been targeting me," he whined, spreading lies, setting me up. Half the neighborhood leaned in. And that's when Linda stood calm as Sunday morning and said, "Actually, Mr. Carson, would you like me to play the footage for everyone? It's public record now." She pulled out a projector. The screen flickered to life. There was Jason, clear as daylight, muttering about robbing me, jimmying my lock. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Daniels from down the block nearly dropped her purse. Jason's face went crimson. That's taken out of context. Really? Linda arched an eyebrow. Because the police timestamp says otherwise. You could feel the tide turn in that room. The same neighbors he'd bragged to at barbecues now whispered about restraining orders and eviction. In an HNA, reputation is currency. Jason's had just plummeted to zero. But the true reversal came a week later, in family court. Emily sat beside me, hands trembling but resolute. Jason strutted in with some bargain bin lawyer, still wearing that smug smirk. He thought this was about divorce proceedings. He had no idea Linda had filed for an emergency protective order, backed by police reports, ring footage, and sworn witness statements. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair, flipped through the file. Her eyes narrowed at Jason. "Mr. Carson, are you seriously contesting this evidence?" she asked. Jason's lawyer fumbled. "Your Honor, my client was caught on video attempting to break into his father-in-law's home." She cut him off, while threatening him verbally, with prior police documentation. The room was silent except for the shuffle of papers. Jason opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, words failed him. The judge sighed. "Protective order granted. Effective immediately. Mr. Carson, you are barred from contacting either Emily or her father. Violation will result in arrest." Emily exhaled, tears streaming down her cheeks. I squeezed her hand. For the first time in months, she looked free. But I wasn't done. The judge wasn't either. Furthermore, given the evidence of financial coercion, I'm freezing any joint accounts until a full audit is completed. Jason's eyes bulged. His little nest egg? Frozen. His control over Emily's paycheck? Gone. That was the moment the smug grin cracked for good. As we left the courthouse, reporters who covered local hearings were waiting. Word had spread, federal investigator out son-in-law in attempted robbery scandal. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved forward. Jason tried to duck his head, but the damage was irreversible. His name was mud, his career prospects demolished, his marriage officially crumbling. And me? I walked out steady, Emily on my arm, the quiet smile of a man who knew the long game had finally paid off. Jason thought I was an easy target. He thought old age meant weakness. But all it meant was I'd had decades to learn patience, and how to time a strike so it landed like a hammer. That was the reversal. Not just beating him at his own petty game, but dismantling his entire facade in front of the people who mattered most: his wife, his community, and the law. And deep down, I knew the final act was still to come. When the courtroom finally emptied, I sat there for a moment, just breathing. The echo of the judge's gavel was still in my ears, but it wasn't noise, it was music. My son-in-law Kyle, who once raised a glass to mock me as an easy target, had just been stripped of every shred of arrogance. He was no longer the clever son-in-law with schemes. He was now a man held accountable, with a restraining order stapled to his name and bankruptcy papers waiting for him like vultures. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt taller. Not because I had humiliated him, though let's be honest, watching his face fall when the judge announced that every asset he tried to siphon was legally mine again, that was delicious, but because I had proven something to myself. I wasn't the old man he saw. I was a man who had built, who had fought, and who still had fight left in him. Outside, my daughter Emily waited. She looked like she'd aged 10 years since this ordeal began, torn between loyalty to her husband and the truth she couldn't ignore anymore. She stepped toward me, her voice soft, breaking. "Dad. I'm sorry. I didn't see it until it was too late." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to apologize for his sins. You're my daughter. That never changes." And in that moment, I realized the victory wasn't just financial, legal, or symbolic. It was about mending the bond with my daughter, the one Kyle tried to poison. But justice wasn't only about me. The judge had done more than just return what Kyle tried to steal. He ordered restitution. Kyle would have to pay back the damages, plus legal fees. And with his credit destroyed, his so-called business gone, and his reputation in town dragged through the mud, his arrogance was finally costing him everything. Weeks later, the neighborhood barbecue rolled around again. This time, I was the one carving the brisket, smiling at the same neighbors who once laughed nervously when Kyle bragged about how easy it would be to rob me. And wouldn't you know it, those same folks now leaned in and whispered, "You handled that with class. You showed him who you really are." Kyle wasn't there, of course. Word had spread. He'd been spotted working shifts at a hardware store 3 towns over, paying off debts, living in a rented basement with no air conditioning. He wasn't the big shot anymore. He was a cautionary tale. The best part? I didn't even have to lift a finger in revenge. The law did it. My patience did it. My refusal to bow down did it. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't slamming the door, it's watching the one who wronged you realize they locked themselves out. Emily hugged me before she left that night, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had my daughter back. Not just because Kyle was gone, but because she saw me for who I was, not fragile, not easy prey, but resilient. I went home, poured myself a small glass of bourbon, and sat on the porch. The stars were bright, the air cool. And I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything, not just money, but dignity, family, self-respect. That's when it hit me, revenge wasn't the point. Empowerment was. Standing tall, protecting what's yours, refusing to let anyone, family or not, define your worth. Kyle had laughed at me once, called me easy to rob. But in the end, he robbed himself of everything that truly mattered. And me? I was still standing. Stronger than before. When I look back on everything that happened, I don't see it as just a story about a greedy son-in-law or a courtroom victory. I see it as a reminder of something bigger. Dignity and self-respect can never be stolen, unless we hand them over. Kyle thought wealth was an open vault he could force his way into, but the real wealth was never in the bank. It was in resilience, patience, and knowing your worth even when someone else tries to devalue you. That's the American way, isn't it? We've always believed in standing on our own 2 feet, in building something with our hands and holding it with pride. Success that comes from hard work and integrity will always outlast shortcuts built on arrogance and greed. Kyle had every chance to build a future for himself and Emily, but he gambled it away because he thought entitlement was faster than effort. That's not how real success works here. In this country, we celebrate the self-made, the fighters, the people who refuse to fold when life tries to humiliate them. And family? Family isn't about blind loyalty to someone toxic. It's about protecting the people you love, even when that means stepping away from those who drag you down. Emily learned that hard truth. And I think many of us watching have faced moments like that too, when we have to decide whether to let toxicity define our homes, or whether to draw a line and say, enough. The truth is, life will always test your backbone. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger, sometimes it comes in the form of someone sitting at your very own dinner table. But the response is the same: stand firm, know your value, and trust that the truth has a way of shining through, even when people try to bury it. And if you take one thing from my story, let it be this: you're never too old, too quiet, or too underestimated to stand up and win. He thought I was easy to rob. Turns out, the only thing he robbed was himself. Backhand index pointing right. If this story hit home for you, don't forget to subscribe. More stories of justice, survival, and sweet revenge are waiting for you here.